exclusive premium hoodie for the 2025 Halloween season, click on the link in the description, which will only be available until Halloween. I've been with my company for a long time now. I'd say probably about 6 years. Thanks to the amount of time I've put in, I have seniority over the other associates. Not to mention, I have a lot more training and qualifications than they do. The company recently got a new contract for some kind of large government office building. It's kind of weird where it's located, being a government office building. I won't go into the exact location, but to give you an idea of what it looks like in the area and why it's so weird, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a huge 6-story building surrounded by a huge parking lot. The parking lot is surrounded by a metal fence about 10 feet tall. There's barbed wire on top of the fence. There's only one entrance and exit to the building in front of the parking lot, which meets a side road, and the side road is about 3 miles from the main road to the highway. The fence is completely wooded. There are no buildings, houses, or other signs of civilization for about a mile. Because of my seniority, I can work any shift and day I want. Typically, I work mornings or evenings and have weekends or Fridays and Saturdays off. But unfortunately, after a few months of being on this new contract, we started having trouble keeping our night shift staff. During the day, there are usually about 3 guards working 7 days a week. On the night shift on weekdays, there are 2 guards. And on the weekends, starting Friday through Sunday, there was only 1 guard on the night shift. Before I go any further, I should mention that every guard is armed every shift. As I said, we are having trouble keeping people on the night shift, mainly the weekend night shift. Because of this, my supervisor asked me if I could help out until they hired more people and could work some overtime on the weekend night shift. I should have, and have in the past, said no thanks. But at the time, I actually needed the extra money because I was getting ready to move into a new apartment soon. So, I went ahead and took the extra shift. The first few weeks were fine. No problems, nothing weird. But what happened on the 3rd weekend made me regret my decision to work overtime. It was around 2 a.m. on a Saturday night. There was a really bad storm outside. I was sitting in the camera control room, which is located on the top floor. The control room has a window that overlooks the back of the parking lot. In the room, there are 3 large computer screens that show live CCTV feeds from all the cameras in the entire building, as well as a few cameras outside the parking lot and next to the entrance/exit of the parking lot. I was sitting in the control room doing what I usually do when I work alone all night. I had the lights off while watching a movie I had downloaded earlier on my phone and was playing games on my Game Boy. I sat for a while and got up to stretch my legs and walk around. I was also starting to get a little sleepy and thought about going down the hall to the vending machine and getting an energy drink. After I got up and walked around the control room for a while and stretched my legs, I went to the window, looked out through the blinds. As I watched, I was looking at the strong wind and rain blowing random debris. I was about to move away from the window to get that energy drink, when suddenly a flash of lightning went up the surrounding area beyond the fence. And just then, I saw a figure dart from one tree to another, quite a distance away. I would say about 20 feet. I held my position, peering through the gap in the screen, waiting for another flash of lightning to see what I was seeing, or if my eyes were playing tricks on me. A few seconds later, another flash of lightning struck. This time I couldn't see anything near or around the tree where I had seen the statue move. At that moment I felt like my eyes were playing tricks on me and it was just me being tired. I got out of the window and went down the hall to drink an energy drink. I immediately fixed everything, hoping that it would start working soon. It took me a while to get back to the control room, which wasn't very long, only 5 minutes. I got back to the control room and immediately noticed that one of the camera feeds had snapped on the screen. There was a camera feed at the back of the parking lot that overlooked the window. I went to the window and looked out the screen at the camera. I saw that it was hanging in the air because of the wires on the post it was mounted on. I thought the strong wind must have snapped it somehow. I went back to my desk and put my report away for the night and then resumed what I was doing. A few minutes later, I was watching a movie on my phone and heard the warning sound the system makes when someone is entering a part of the building that requires a code to be entered on the keypad. I looked at the main screen and pulled up the tab showing the building's access points. It showed me that the one being entered was near the parking lot at the back of the building. At that moment, a shiver went down my spine as I realized that someone was outside. From the shadow picture to the camera being taken out and now using the keypad. Whoever it was, they had the code because they had entered and the system was giving me the green light. I thought to myself, it couldn't be another employee or security guard. If it was an employee, we would have had a memo saying who it was and when they would be here, as well as what part of the building they would be in. I knew it wasn't a security guard because I knew about it too. I picked up the phone on my desk to try to call the police, but it was off. I looked at my phone and of course there was no service. I thought the best way was to walk around the corridor and try to get service on my phone. I left the control room and went into the corridor. I walked down the corridor towards the service stairs, looking at my phone, hoping to get a signal soon. Just then, as I was looking at my phone, the power went out. Being so close to the stairs, I immediately decided to run down the stairs to the front lobby and open the door to my truck and get out. I walked to the stairs and opened the door. It was almost pitch black inside. I took advantage of the darkness to quietly go down the stairs. I figured if this person had cut the power, they would be in the generator room, which was in the basement. Unfortunately, the only flight of stairs below the one I was taking in the lobby was the basement. And the generator wasn't far from the stairs I was on. I went down to the 4th floor and suddenly I heard a door open at the bottom of the stairs. I stopped. At this point, I knew I had a weapon, but I was thinking to myself, even though I was going through training, I wasn't ready to shoot anyone. I was hoping and praying that it wouldn't happen. As I stood there thinking about my firearm training, I heard heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. I wasted no time in coming up with a new plan. I wanted to turn around and run up the stairs as fast as I could to get to the 6th floor where I had come from. At the top of the stairs, a few feet from the door to the stairs, there was a ladder that led to a hatch that led to the roof of the building. I was about to go up the stairs, just before you had to open the hatch and hide there in the darkness until something more happened. I turned around as I did. My gun clanged loudly against the metal of the stair railing. I froze as I heard heavy footsteps. A few seconds passed and then I heard someone running up the stairs as fast as they could. I jumped up as fast as I could, running up the stairs as if my life depended on it. As I was about to head up the stairs, just before the door I had come through, an idea occurred to me to make a sudden turn. I quickly opened the door with a loud bang, then let go of the handle and closed it and pushed myself in. I ran towards the stairs and continued up. In doing so, I felt as if I had knocked the door down. With only a few seconds left, I was up the stairs. The man, confused by the trick of the door, opened the door without looking at me. He ran into the hall, the heavy door closing behind him. Just then I had my chance. I just jumped off a 10-foot high staircase, my feet hit the floor with a loud thud. I ran for the stairs. The man must have heard the sound because before I could even get down the stairs, I heard the door open and his footsteps coming down behind me. We were both running as fast as we could. I managed to stay one floor ahead of him the whole way. When I reached the lobby, luck was suddenly on my side. Behind me, I heard a loud thud and then a scream of pain. I wasn't sure, but I thought the man had tripped and fallen down the stairs. I wasn't going to wait to be sure. I broke down the door and ran straight to the entrance and unlocked it with my key. Luckily, I always parked my truck nearby. With the wind howling and the rain pouring down, I hit the fob to start the engine and ran to unlock the doors. I jumped in the truck, threw the truck into reverse, and just then I saw him, dressed in black, his face covered with a mask and hood, running out of the building toward my car. I put the gear in drive and threw it on the floor, the tires screeching as I pulled out of the lot and onto a side street. I almost got a signal on my phone when I got to the main street. I immediately called the police. They arrived about 15 minutes later and I followed them back to the building. I told them everything, filled out their and my company reports. We searched the entire building and the surrounding area, but found nothing. The scariest part was when they checked the stairs. Apparently, when the guy fell, he dropped something. The police recovered a fully loaded, unregistered semi-automatic gun. To this day, no one knows why anyone would have broken into that building. There was nothing special about it, it was just government property. Regardless, I'm grateful that luck was on my side that night. I worked nights as a security guard in a mid-sized corporate office building in New Jersey. And most of the time, the nights were boring, quiet, and unpredictable. That's why what happened one night has stuck with me so vividly for years. It started in the middle of the night after the last employees had left the building, and the lobby was empty except for me. Just me and the light on the security monitor. My job was simple. Check the cameras, do a couple of patrols, record any incidents, and most of the time just sit and watch for anything unusual. That night, I was going through my normal routine, scanning the screens of the elevators, hallways, and underground parking garage, when I noticed a man moving in the middle of the cars on the feed from the garage below, which immediately caught my attention because the lot should have been completely empty at this point. Only people with 24-hour access were allowed in, and I knew that no one else could have gotten in at that moment. At first, I thought it might be one of the IT staff who came in late or maybe a member of the cleaning crew, but it didn't make sense because the cleaners had left hours ago and the man wasn't carrying any equipment or wearing any uniform. He was wearing a long car coat that looked a little too big, and he wasn't heading for any particular car or exit. He was just moving slowly, moving around in a line as if he were inspecting the area or making sure no one was around. And something about the way he was moving gave me the chills. I couldn't get my finger on it, but it was off. I called the supervisor and explained what I was seeing. And he told me to stay at my post and keep an eye on the camera, which I did, but my gut told me I had to check it out in person. So, I grabbed my flashlight and headed down to the garage. The elevator ride was long, slow, and the floors it went through seemed to echo in the shaft, which made me more willing to admit it. When the door opened at the garage level, I scanned the grounds with my flashlight, and it was empty, completely silent, a silence that presses against your ears and makes every little canal in the building seem huge. I called out, "Hello, security here." But the echo came back empty, and I heard no answer. I walked slowly down the row of cars, lights shining in every dark corner, every space between the vehicles, but there was nothing there. Not a shadow, not a person. My pulse was racing and I began to doubt myself, wondering if maybe the camera wasn't working properly, or if it had caught a shadow that wasn't really there. So, I went back upstairs to the lobby to shake it off. But every time I sat down again and looked down at the garage floor, I saw that he was standing in exactly the same place, as if he hadn't moved since I had been there. And now my stomach was sick because I knew I had been there. And he couldn't have gone back to the same spot unnoticed unless he was watching me, or worse, waiting for me. I radioed my supervisor again, telling him I would keep watching the cameras, and he told me not to approach him unless absolutely necessary. Which was easy to say because I couldn't stop staring at him and my mind was already racing through every possible scenario. For the next 20 minutes, I watched him slowly walk toward the stairs leading to the top floor. He cautiously walked forward, pausing, glancing over his shoulder as if he were looking for someone. Then he disappeared from the cameras just before he reached the door, which left me with nothing more to stomach. I checked all the other feeds. The hallway, the elevator lobby, even the rooftop entrance. There was nothing. There was no sign of him, which made me feel even worse because it was impossible for him to disappear so quickly. And it gave me a sinking feeling that somehow he had access to the building, or that he was hiding in some way that I couldn't see. I stood at my desk, heart pounding, until the elevator opened into the lobby. No one was inside, but on the polished floor, I could see wet footprints from the elevator into the main lobby. Bare feet, which was wrong on many levels because it was cold outside and he would have had to take off his shoes to walk around barefoot. I froze my way, realizing that if he was inside the building now, he could be anywhere. And every open office or storage room was a potential hiding place. I called the local off-site patrol for backup and argued with myself about barricading myself in the lobby, but something inside me told me I had to patrol and confirm the situation, which in retrospect was probably wrong. I took the elevator to the 5th floor and began walking slowly down the corridors, flashlight in hand, scanning each office door, checking for movement. Every nook and cranny of the building made me jump. Down the middle of the hall, I saw one of the office doors slightly ajar, which was impossible because it was always locked at night. I peeked inside with my flashlight and pushed the door open, but the room was empty except for a sleeping computer monitor and a chair pushed under the desk. Nothing else. I stepped back into the hall and froze as I heard footsteps on the tiles behind me. Not mine. Heavy, wet, and uneven, coming quickly toward me. My heart leapt into my throat, and I swung my flashlight around the hall, catching a glimpse of the black coat at the end of the corridor. He wasn't running, but he was walking quickly with a purpose. And I felt like he had been following me the whole time, hiding as soon as the cameras saw him. I ran toward the hall stairs, not realizing the handrail was scraping against my hand as I sped forward. The footsteps were so close I could hear them clearly, echoing through the hall. And I realized I had no idea how he had gotten in. I couldn't understand what he wanted, and the panic was almost suffocating. I ran up the stairs, down a few steps, and slammed the back door, while the sound of footsteps thundered through the floor above. Then they suddenly stopped, and I sat there trembling for several minutes, trying to catch my breath and convince myself that I had imagined it. But the sound of my own breathing and the echo of those steps were driving me crazy. When the patrol finally arrived, I was pale, sweaty, and shaking. Together we walked from floor to floor, room to room, and the garage was completely empty. There was no sign of the intruder, no footprints, nothing. And when we checked the cameras, the footage from the time of his appearance had been overwritten or distorted, leaving a gap in the recording that made my skin tingle even more. I quit that job within a month. Partly because of fear and partly because I couldn't bear to walk down the hallway alone. Especially when the garage was empty and the wind outside was blowing through the building, because every shadow and every sound reminded me of walking back and forth behind him, just waiting out of sight. Even years later, I get anxious at night in a parking garage or office building, and I still check more than my shoulder, thinking I might see that long coat around the corner, hear those wet footsteps behind me. And I know that what I felt wasn't supernatural. It wasn't a faceless ghost or a ghost. It was a real person, a stalker. And the thought that he was following me inside that building, just hiding out of sight, and that I might never know how he got in or what he wanted, still haunts me every time I think about that night. Music, that happened to me a few days ago. Actually, it was my first night of training as a mobile security guard. Before I tell my story, I want to clarify that a mobile security guard is basically a security guard who drives around in a car and visits locations that clients need security. In this case, it's the GTA in Toronto, but the incident took place at a nearby pharmacy/medical clinic in Mississauga. It was my first night as a trainee, and my supervisor was a great guy who taught me about patrolling, writing reports, disarming fire alarms, etc. Normally, if an alarm goes off, dispatch would notify us via radio and tell us to be present at the location where the alarm was going off. However, we arrived at the medical clinic in Mississauga to conduct a regular perimeter patrol, which meant there was no alarm. We arrived at the scene around 1:15 a.m. to make sure everything was normal. But when we got out of the car and approached the building, something terribly wrong occurred. First, the underground parking garage was open. And second, the front door of the building was open. My supervisor then said, "How is this possible? If someone broke in, the alarm should go off." I didn't know how to react because this was my first time on site. And according to my supervisor, it was a new contract that I work for the security company. We cautiously stepped into the building. But suddenly, my supervisor said, "Look at the elevator. It's going up and down in different levels." Of course, he wasn't kidding. As the elevator moved from G1, 2, 3 and stopped at level 4, which was the very top, I asked my supervisor if he thought anyone was here. He immediately shook his head and took out his stick. At that moment, I felt a pain in my stomach and I started breathing heavily. At that moment, I hated my job and didn't want to be there. We immediately got into the elevator and went straight to the top floor. I had a bad feeling and some adrenaline was flowing through my body even before the elevator doors opened. As we climbed each floor, I thought to myself, what if something happens or whoever this person or thing is, maybe they'll just walk away without a fight and attack us as soon as the elevator doors open. However, luckily, when we reached the 4th floor, there was no one in front of us, but it was very dark. So, we turned on the lights and started searching the rooms on that floor. My supervisor asked me to stay with him because he was also feeling uneasy. He said, "Stay with me and be ready to stop this evil act." Luckily, no one was there. So, we were very shocked and didn't realize what was happening until we heard footsteps coming up the stairs. My supervisor and I were about to open the stairwell door and chase whoever was inside. But just then the footsteps stopped and everything went very quiet. We could only hear each other's breathing. I will never forget what my supervisor said next to dispatch, and it still rings in my head. "Call A4, C25. Go ahead. Dispatch, we need immediate backup. Please be advised that there is someone in the building with us and they are hiding downstairs, possibly armed and waiting for us to come towards them so that he or they can ambush us." Dispatch then tells us to stay where we are and not approach the suspect, or anyone downstairs will be there as backup soon. At that point, my supervisor starts to panic and it makes the situation worse. I mean, he should be the one taking the lead and not worrying. But again, I don't blame him because this experience was overwhelming and terrifying for me. Now, my supervisor is only a few years older than me, so I prefer to call him bro instead of sir or anything else. "Bro, don't worry. I'm sure backup will be here soon," I told him. "You might be wondering why we can't just run through the exit doors. Well, you see, the suspect is on the ground floor, which means he could be anywhere. So, hearing the elevator, he might get scared and stand in front of the elevator and block our way. The suspect could come up and approach us, but I guess he or they thought we could surprise him. So maybe he was quietly waiting for us in the corner downstairs." 15 minutes later, we heard the door open. It was our senior supervisor and his voice echoed, "Security." My supervisor radioed him, "Sir, we're upstairs. Be careful. There's someone downstairs." A few minutes later, the senior supervisor met us upstairs and told us to investigate with him. So, we went. But we looked everywhere on the ground floor and then on every floor and couldn't find anyone. When we were on the 3rd floor, scanning every room and bathroom to see if the person was there, we heard the front door open and heard footsteps outside. We weren't quick enough to figure out who it was because by the time we got to the ground floor, the suspect was gone. Both my supervisor and I were shocked because we searched everywhere and couldn't find anyone. Either the person was in a very good hiding place or that medical clinic center was haunted. I don't think I'll ever know. But it was the most terrifying experience of my life. And this weekend, I will be there again for site visits, but this time alone because I will be trained by the man